This episode of Inside EMS podcast is sponsored by LogRx. Learn a better way to track your narcotics at logrx.com.
Well, it's Friday, and everybody knows it's Friday. It's time to go inside EMS. I am your host, Chris Saballero, and with me always is my faithful friend, 10 years, 600 shows, 2 million listens, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, Kelly Grayson, KG. How are things going on this week?
Well, the ladies know I've got the power. You forgot
The ladies know you're the man
part.
with the power. I cut it short. I didn't want to build your head up
I
this
got you.
week, so we cut it short.
It's good. It's been it was a good day. We actually had some productive discussion paramedic class, and these guys we did AMLS scenarios all day, and they did good. They're getting to be pretty good clinicians. They could be better communicators, but we're working on that. It's hard being new, being in charge,
though. Yeah. You need me to come out of retirement and do some education for you?
Oh, no. I need an instructor, not a carnival barker.
Oh, okay. So not funny. But we have a guest and he's there. We don't want to leave him waiting too long. He's a friend of the show. We've tried to get him on. Mick, we've talked so many times about having you on. Mic Gunderson, he's the president of the EMS Quality Academy. He's also editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Paramedicine, and what we're going to talk about today. Mick, I know you're a long-time listener, first-time caller. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad we can finally pull this off.
I mean, how long have we been talking about having you on? I mean, it's been years and years.
10 plus years.
Every time I see him at the conference, Mick, we got to get you on. Just let me know when. And I think some of that has fallen in my lap that I've never followed up.
It's Saballero's fault.
Yeah. So.
It's Saballero's fault.
We're excited. I mean, this is really something great to talk about, the International Journal of Paramedicine. Mick, I think the first question I want to ask you is, what was the brainchild of this? And moreover, what's the vision for this journal?
Sure. So this is actually version 2.0, if you will, of NEMSMA's journal. A little bit of backstory here. The NEMSMA itself began as a quality managers association, and then kind of transformed into more of a general EMS management association out of the realization that it isn't really the people that were sitting in the cubicle with the red pen marking up, paper charts, and playing quality cop in the corner that we're going to change process and system design and fundamentally improve the quality of what we do. It's really about the whole way the organization is managed. And so we, through some collaboration with a number of people in the leadership of the association at the time, most notably Todd Hatley, we kind of changed it into the National EMS Management Association. And part of the vision we had when getting the organization started was to have a peer-reviewed academic journal that wouldn't be limited to just clinical topics, but we wanted to do a whole lot more with operations and administration. But, looking at it through the lens of science and scholarly discourse and those sorts of things, to just kind of elevate the level of discussion and debate and dialogue about what we do and how we go about doing it. So we started the EMS Management Journal back in the early 2000s, and that lasted for a while, and we kind of got tangled up with another company that ended up going belly up and ended up taking the journal with it, unfortunately. But I always wanted to get it restarted, but instead of having it under the control of a separate company, this time I wanted to try to get it started again, but owned and self-published directly by NEMSMA. And there's now open source software available to help manage the back end of a journal instead of trying to do everything on Excel spreadsheets and stones and chisels and that sort of thing. So we're taking advantage of this newer technology, if you will, to publish the journal, and not really looking at the fact that it's an online journal as a limitation, but use it as more of an advantage because we don't have to be worried about page counts and things like that you would with budgets for paper journals. So it allows us to do a lot of other things that you typically wouldn't see in a print journal. And we're just trying to embrace all of that. And so we got this journal started here. We're now in our 5th issue. We publish quarterly, and it's really starting to take off.
It is, yeah. I mean, and just for follow-up, I mean, and the reason that I got in touch with you was because the latest issue just came out, and I was breezing through it, and I said, I've got to get Mick on to talk about this. And, you know, I'm a fan of it, and, you know, I get the journal, and it's been really, really interesting to hear the thoughts of everyone who's publishing in it.
And now let's pause for a word from our sponsor.
Designed and founded by EMS professionals, LogRx provides real-time accountability of all your narcotics from cradle to grave. Reach out today for a demo and download the app on the iTunes and Google Play stores. And coming soon, LogRx will also track your medical supplies, equipment, PPE, and even vehicle checks. For more information, visit logrx.com. That's LOGRX.com.
I guess just as a follow-up, Kelly, if you don't mind. So in this 5 issues, and you've been around EMS for a long time, what's been your aha moment? What's been your, you know, maybe even satisfaction of seeing this in print finally? But I'm sure you got to be learning tons as this is going on.
Yeah, well, this is actually the 6th journal that I've participated in the birthing of. I started
like a journal midwife.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
A journal doula.
Back in the late 70s, I was working at a medical school in Tampa in an oxygen transport physiology lab, studying shock and resuscitation. And I quickly realized that the coin of the realm at the medical school was publishing in peer-reviewed journals. And I was working for the chairman of the Department of Surgery, who at the time was also president of the American Trauma Society. He was a trauma surgeon. And I remember we were working in the lab one day, and we were just kind of talking back and forth. And I said, well, what's the peer-reviewed academic journal for EMS? And he started laughing. And the issue, you know, was that emergency medicine itself was just starting as a specialty. And so EMS was, you know, still a way, you know, several steps behind in the evolutionary cycle of a profession. And so the profession just wasn't evolved to the point where it had a peer-reviewed journal yet. And that's the way things were for several years. And then down the hallway, there was an engineer who got this new computer called a Macintosh. And I discovered it could do page layout and columns and everything. And I thought, wow, so, you know, why don't I just start a peer-reviewed academic journal? And I was just, you know, me still riding backwards on the fire truck and going to school. Didn't know I was supposed to be a big fancy professional society and everything to start a peer-reviewed journal. I just talked to some faculty around the medical school and some of the local medical directors, and we started the Tampa Bay EMS Journal and set up a peer review process. And within a year, it went national as the Journal of Pre-Hospital Medicine. Any EMSP was just kind of getting started itself, and they wanted to do a journal. And then couple names you might remember from the past, a guy by the name of R. Adams Cowley, the guy who started shock trauma in Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, that's a name from the past.
Yeah. And he and Peter Saffer out of Pittsburgh, the guy who, you know, was basically developed mouth-to-mouth breathing, got Nancy Caroline dragged into getting the Freedom House ambulance service started, you know, resuscitation scientist extraordinaire. He and Dr. Cowley were editing the Journal of the World Association for Disaster and Emergency Medicine. And Saffer was just down the hall from Ron Stewart in Pittsburgh, who was the first president for NEMSP. And they were having a conversation. NEMSP wanted to start a journal. And the WADM journal was kind of floundering, so they decided to combine forces and start the first EMS journal. And then they caught wind of Journal of Pre-Hospital Medicine from somebody they never heard of down in Florida, and came to discover I was still riding backwards on a fire truck running calls. And so, long story short, we all got together, decided to collaborate on it, and that's what started Pre-Hospital and Disaster Medicine, which is still in print now, published by Cambridge University Press, and Sam Stratton out in LA is the editor. But that's how that journal got started.
Yeah.
And so those were the first 3 journals. I helped a professional society in South America start a journal, Emergentias Medicus, but financially they weren't able to sustain the effort, so that one failed, unfortunately. Then the EMS Management Journal I told you about, and this one's number 6, the International Journal of Pre-Hospital Medicine. So I've been interested in academic publishing for a long time, and I just thought it was something that I've kind of figured out how to do, and it was something that I could do to give back to the profession, because everybody working on the journal is a volunteer.
Right.
We self-publish. We don't have a professional publishing house funding all of this or anything of that nature. And my thought was we could approach this almost like the open source software community does, all kinds of things. The Linux operating system, a lot of the infrastructure that underpins the internet is done by thousands of volunteers all over the planet who don't even share the same spoken language, but they can still put together millions of lines of computer code and make it all work. So my thought was that somewhere within the discipline, not even limited to the United States, we could find people to not only be peer reviewers, but copy editors, layout editors, proofreaders, statisticians, etc. And so that effort has been very successful. And now we've got a team of over 150 people working together to make this journal go.
It sounds like a labor of love for a bunch of dedicated people, and sorely needed. I was trying to recall off the top of my head the names of any pre-hospital peer-reviewed journals, and I could only come up with 3 or 4. Pre-hospital emergency care comes to mind, the ones you mentioned, and this would be the 4th or 5th that I can think of. And that's, to my mind, that's always been one of the biggest obstacles to our advancement of a profession, is that the people that do research about EMS are not EMS. That's not to say that the research is bad, but they don't understand necessarily intrinsically what our concerns are, where we come from, what's relevant or not to our care. Case in point, I gave my students an assignment a couple of months back, and they were citing Wikipedia. One person was dug up the study, and I make air quotes when I say that patients were less likely to survive if they were transported in an ALS ambulance than they were in a BLS ambulance, and oblivious to the fact that was based on Medicare billing rates and not actual, randomization or anything else. And so that segued into a great discussion about the validity of research and how, as a profession, unqualified we are to really evaluate the quality of research personally. And we don't have enough journals out there and examples for what we should aspire to in being stewards of our profession. But my point is that the people that most need to read current EMS research are the people most or least likely to read it. We all know the type. It's the guy that's still practicing medicine or pre-hospital medicine like he did 20 years ago. And the names of the drugs change and the nomenclature changes, but he still has that same mindset. How do you make this palatable or sell it and package it to the rank and file EMT or paramedic, someone with maybe not a college background, maybe not an understanding or appreciation for the value of research, how do you speak it to the masses and get them to understand? That's my
Yeah, no,
question.
terrific points, Kelly. And that really speaks to some of the core ideas for the vision of the journal. In addition to looking at things other than just clinical issues, looking at operations, administration, finance, etc. If you look at the masthead page of the journal where it lists all the reviewers, you'll find that a lot of those folks are not affiliated with academic institutions. A lot of them, don't have doctorate degrees, etc. There's a mixture of what I call town and gown. There's people who are from academic backgrounds, do research, but say we get a manuscript in about emergency medical dispatch, for example. An academician will be able to look at it and the materials and methods and the statistics, et cetera, and evaluate whether or not the study design was sound, if they, made their arguments, in line with the data, et cetera. But I also wanted somebody who is at the tip of the spear, somebody who actually sits in a comm center and answers calls and gives pre-arrival instruction and does triage and does deployment and manages the comm centers and those sorts of things to also give their opinions and perspectives on a manuscript of that nature. And that's one of the reasons why the editorial team is so large. Is I wanted a very diverse editorial board with a combination of the academic background as well as the practical tip of the spear background, if you will. So I think that will add some validity and street reality to some of the things that you'll see in the journal. But as far as outreach, one of the things we can do with the journal that's going to be a little bit different than what journals have done in the past is I want to have a very, very strong social media presence. And this is part of the journal that's just now starting to get rolling. But when an article is published, it really disappoints me many times because it seems like it's the end of a process. There's been all this research done, they collected all the data, they ran the analysis, they wrote it up, they published the paper, and that seems kind of like the end of the story. But when I go to a scientific conference and they're presenting the research in an oral abstract format, at the end of an oral abstract presentation, you'll typically have all the other researchers that are working in that little area sitting in the audience because they're going to be presenting later or already presented during the day. And they open up the floor for questions. And those other researchers or other clinicians that are in the audience will step up to the microphone and they'll start challenging, well, why did you use this particular statistical test? Or had you considered this other way of interpreting the data? And that kind of conversation is incredibly healthy for moving the art and science forward. And I want to try to do something to encourage that same kind of dialogue in the journal. So what we're going to do is our letters to the editor section of the journal, so to speak, is going to be called dialogues. But what we're going to do is going to be a little bit different. We're going to use the NEMSMA listserv, and we're going to initiate message threads on the NEMSMA listserv for each of the major articles. Invite the authors to help start the conversation about their paper, and then through this very accessible format, we can have conversations on the listserv with those same kinds of questions and conversation back and forth between the authors, the clinicians, the other researchers, et cetera, between themselves back and forth. And what we want to do is curate parts of that message thread out and actually publish that in the pages of the journal as part of our letters to the editor or dialogue section. Do the same with posting things on LinkedIn, other social media platforms, just so that it's going to be pushed out there through Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., so that people will find it a lot more accessible than just reading the dry journal article. They'll be able to watch a YouTube video with us talking with the authors, and then in the comments on the YouTube page, again, have this kind of, healthy debate, not just between the academicians, but the people who are at the
Yeah.
tip of the spear doing the job.
Yeah, there's certainly room for that on social media, because God knows most EMS forums are memes and dirty jokes and t-shirt ads, which I love me a good meme and dirty jokes, obviously, but there's precious little for intelligent, high-minded discussion about the issues of our profession. There's only a few, that are really clinically astute. You listen to Foam Frat podcast and follow their page, or St. Fisher's Church of Emergency-Based Medicine and those things. But I can't really think of a bunch of others offhand where, you can interact and dialogue with the authors of a pre-hospital study. I look forward to diving in there and playing with those dialogues when you roll that out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's an easy way to kind of get yourself into the discussion, potentially even into the pages of the journal, kind of dip your toe in the water. And my hope is that through that, people will get a little bit more interested, pay a little bit more attention to the research. My big aspiration is they actually read the full manuscript in the journal after, hearing the podcast or watching the YouTube video, etc. And just start drawing them in.
It's
And
okay to dream, Mick. It's
yeah. Well,
as an educator,
we'll
I'm
see.
still dreaming that they'll one day read the syllabus, but
Well, funny story about that, Kelly. When I started the Tampa Bay EMS Journal, it was funny. I remember several people basically had the same conversation with me. That sounds great, Mick. You and 4 of your nerdy friends around the country will read this, and that'll be about the extent of it. And for a while, that was true. But, kept at it. It's been growing. And so now I think we're up to 6 or 7.
well, that's the whole premise for this show is 2 nerdy paramedics sitting in the front of the truck between calls discussing the issues of our profession. So 10 million listens and 6 or 10 years of this. So yeah, it works.
Yep, it
It
does.
works. You can find people.
Hey, Mick, let's talk specifically though. I mean, we've talked about the interaction, we talked about how it started. What's the journal about? I mean, what are the different sections of the journal, and what could people expect when they open that up?
So it's quickly evolving. Let me start out saying that. Right now, we've been publishing a lot of traditional types of articles, research studies, literature reviews, a few case studies, that sort of thing. But the vision for the journal is much, much broader. You'll notice, again, if you look at the masthead page, there's a number of different section editors there for things like performance indicators and perspectives and a bunch of other things, and it's not obvious what those things are about. But what those different sections are about is different types of scholarly or academic discourse, if you will. So, for example, one of the things we really want to try to encourage people to do is to publish the methods and results of their agency's quality assurance and quality improvement projects. We'd like to see agencies publish the specifications of their KPIs or performance metrics. We'd like to start publishing the kind of a standard set of specifications of different EMS systems around the world. So imagine a set of parameters, population size, square mileage, number of units, number of clinicians at different levels, all of these specifications about a system. And we, over time, try to hit a variety of different systems around the world, because right now the only place you can find those is in the materials and methods of a peer-reviewed research article, and not all agencies do peer-reviewed research. Not all of the papers they publish kind of give this more comprehensive view about the specifications of their system. So that's one of the other sections. Another one is comparisons. Again, you only see those with agencies that have published a peer-reviewed article. But let's suppose we want to look at the way that different agencies around the world declare STEM alerts, for example. We might, the comparison section would examine the processes for the same issue or process within an EMS system, but side by side. This is how London does it. This is how Sydney, Australia does it. This is how Los Angeles does it. This is how Hanoi does it. This is how, Santiago, Chile does it, etc. So that we start getting this broader perspective about how different agencies around the world are addressing these different process issues. So there's a much broader variety of scholarship that we want to encourage in EMS. And again, it's not just about, do we give drug A or drug B or use widget A or widget B to secure the airway, et cetera. We want to look at all of the different operational, administrative, and support processes that make up a paramedicine system around the world.
Awesome. And one last question for you before we go to close. And this is something near and dear to our heart because EMS1 is famous for giving new people the opportunity to get involved and write and appear on podcasts and whatnot and become stewards of their profession. How do people get involved on the International Journal of Paramedicine? How do they contribute? How would they be one of those volunteers you spoke of?
Sure. So if you go to our website, internationaljournalofparamedicine.com, there's an About section and a under About, there's also a little drop down called Submissions, and that'll describe how to submit a manuscript and what all the different categories are in the descriptions for each of those. So if you're an author and you want to publish, your performance indicator that your agency uses or any of those sorts of things, check that out, definitely. But if you'd like to get involved on the journal team, which given how many manuscripts we're starting to get in,
you said something like 80 in the pipeline right now.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
success
amazing
by any measure. Yeah,
absolutely. So I need more reviewers, both academicians and people from the tip of the spear. So if you're interested in trying to do critical evaluations of submitted manuscripts, even if you don't have a formal academic background, that's okay. Just have, whoever is interested, send me an email, mic.gunderson@internationaljournalofparamedicine.com, and we'll have a conversation about it, because I am looking for more people to not only be reviewers, but also participate in these different other sections we've been talking about. So there's a lot of opportunity for people who want to actually step up and do something about advancing the profession. This is an opportunity to do that.
Great. Chris, you'll have to learn how to read first, but
as long as it's written in crayon, I'll be okay.
But hey, that's great. New journal on the horizon. We've got 5 issues out already. The International Journal of Paramedicine. So you've heard about the journal from Mick, and if you're eager to get involved, hit him up at the email address he provided. We'd like to hear what you think about pre-hospital peer-reviewed research. How much of it is there? Where can you find it? Are you even reading peer-reviewed research? And if not, why not? We'd like to hear your thoughts at the show at ems1.com. And for myself and co-host Chris Ceballero and our special guest this week, Mic Gunderson, thanks for tuning in. Inside EMS. We're going to catch you guys next week.